Well, they did start talking in a few seconds in. Good.
The UCS Computational Imaging Lab develops imaging systems by jointly optimizing both the hardware and algorithms. This delivers new capabilities not possible with prior approaches, putting them to the test in the lab space located in Jacobs Hall. Here, there is ample space to build and characterize systems, as well as access to workstations and servers for image processing and machine learning. The main lab space is shared with Professor Ford's Photonic Systems and This lab space comprises a central hub and multiple satellite optics labs. The central hub contains electronics workbenches, student desks, and a conference room used for impromptu meetings and discussions. The satellite optics labs are where the imaging experiments happen. Satellite Optics Lab 1 includes an optics table, workbench, and storage space, and overhead power delivery and component storage. Safety equipment is in place to allow laser experiments. Within this lab is a 20-foot Newport optical table, where students gain hands-on experience prototyping their design concepts. Whatever students dream up, this is where it will come to life. Satellite Lab 2 is just like Room 1, but with the addition of panoramic photo test charts and studio lighting. These are convenient for characterizing camera performance. Lab 2's optics table is also 20 feet length and is an open space for students to build. This area also has inspection microscopes and useful resolution testing charts. In addition to the main optics lab, the group also has access to a maker lab with tools for customizing optical systems. This lab has many machining tools, including a CNC and mill for customizing hardware. Additionally, this space has UV curing, microscopes, and vacuum ovens, which allow for customizing and assembling optical components. The central hub provides ample desk space for students to work, including access to the workstation computers for optical design. Additionally, students have access to multi-GPU servers housed in the San Diego Supercomputer Center, which provide high-performance computing resources to develop image reconstruction algorithms and optimize optical systems. This miniaturized microscope is an example of the types of systems developed in the Computational Imaging Lab. It combines 3D printed parts with off-the-shelf optics and algorithms to enable 3D microscopy in a tiny package. The entire microscope is smaller than a quarter, as shown on the left. Shown on the right is a 3D image of neurons taken with this microscope. For more information, please visit ece.ucsd.edu.
All right, that's what we had for you guys.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how are we doing questions? Are we going to do like in the chat or just sort of free form or?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to go ahead and just ask questions, that's fine. Or if you want to write them down in the chat, I can go ahead and read them and then have the professor answer, however you guys feel more comfortable.
So I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So I saw that it seems like that you are, or you seem to be, you're a new professor at San Diego, and I was wondering, what is the process for you like to be able to get your lab up and running, and where do you think a graduate student would, what type of research do you think they're going to be doing, or what kind of work are they going to do to help you get your lab up and running?
Yeah, that's a great question. So an interesting aspect of my position here is that I'm actually sharing the lab space with Joe Ford. So he's actually on leave currently. He has no active students. One of his projects turned into a company actually. So that company has one project that's going on in the lab, but other than that, it was basically going to sit unused, and so they decided that it would be advantageous for my lab to take over the space. So this is actually pretty nice because it means there's a lot of stuff already in place. So a lot of times a new professor will ask their first student to be placing orders and like setting up basic components and things like this. And so there will be some of that, but it would be largely focused around individual projects, not sort of general lab infrastructure. So the idea would be, once we start working together, if you come up with some kind of an interesting design or something you want to try out, then it would be you would help in sort of procuring hardware and like designing where the experiment would happen and things like that. But you won't be spending the first like 6 months just interfacing with like the purchasing systems, if that's your question. In terms of working in the labs, my understanding is that as long as there's only one person per room, it's fine. So one of the nice things about the way this lab is set up is that there's 2 separate optics table rooms, and so we can have sort of one person in each until vaccinations are rolled out. But yeah, that's a good question.
I had one question.
Yeah.
So, like right now, as you said, there can be one person in one room, right? So, for example, if someone's new to the hardware setups and stuff, so is there enough infrastructure or guidelines in place for them to like set things up on their own, or like?
Yeah, I think if you're asking about like getting training done,
Yeah.
I do think that's going to be a challenge. And I'm still sort of figuring out how that will work. I'm hoping that by next year, by the time any of you are considering coming here, vaccines will be in place. And hopefully all of these weird new variants will just not matter. Fingers crossed. In that case, my goal would be to have you work with me, as well as working with one of Joe's former students who is still using the lab to get trained up on the equipment that you need for your projects.
Okay.
If things with the pandemic are still bad, then we'll have to be creative. The nice thing about computational imaging is that it sort of goes, the research goes in cycles in terms of sort of lab work and then computational work. You can sort of switch domains. So it makes it a little easier to interweave your work with other people. Pure experimental labs have much more challenges on this. So it's sort of nice being able to switch between the two. So you'd be able to access servers from home if you have to.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the tags after the lab tour. So what's your like future projects plan? Is it more related to machine learning, or is it related to like setups and setup buildings? Or you will separate people to do the different projects in different fields?
I don't plan on forcing anyone to do anything that they don't think is fun. So I think, well, at least not too much. I mean, the thing about computational imaging that I think is fun is that if you want to specialize in the machine learning aspect and just bring that to bear on computational imaging problems, that would have impact. I think there's also, there's a ton of impact to be made by actually trying out your systems, like actually building prototypes and trying to build like usable platforms, and then collaborating, for instance, on like neuroscience. Any contribution that computational imaging has to make on neuroscience would come in the form of really being at the intersection of the hardware and the algorithms. And so in that sense, I think, I try to put myself sort of right between the two, because I find both the signal processing and the hardware exciting. But plenty of people can make a contribution by emphasizing one side more than the other. I think it's important to learn how to speak the language of both domains, though. So I think maybe like an 80-20 split would be sort of as far as I think it makes sense to go in either direction. But I think if someone wants to be 50-50, the point of grad school is to learn, right? So if you come here and you know optics and you want to learn machine learning, great. Vice versa, it's also fine. If you know neither and just have a physics background, that's also fine. There's time to learn at the beginning, right? Did that answer your question? That was.
Yeah, it did.
Cool.
Since we're talking about the learning process,
yeah.
I have a question about how the coursework fall in the major fields as prescribed by the department. Mm-hmm. So are we going to take some of the graduate courses in photonics field and some of them in signal processing, or do we just need to focus on one field for like a graduate requirement?
My understanding is that if you're coming in with a bachelor's, then you have to you have to satisfy like the core course requirement for your area, and that would be either signal and image processing or photonics, and then you have to pass the prelim in that area. If you're coming into the master's, it's not actually required that you take the courses in your area per se. You just have to pass the prelim in that area. So if you if you're solid on, your respective field as a master's student, you don't actually have to take the courses. But we're planning on offering like a course specifically on computational imaging at some point in the future, which will sort of be at the intersection of the two areas. But no, I mean, the idea is there's some core course requirements you have, like depth in a particular area, but you can take breadth courses that span domains. And I would work with you to pick out the courses that would actually be helpful. Because I know for me, I came into my PhD with an optics background, so I didn't even really know what signal processing I should take. And I would help you pick out like the relevant courses in sort of the domain that's in your breadth area.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question.
I have another question if no one else has one.
Go for it.
So this one might be a little more personal than these other questions, but why did you choose to why did you choose to be a research PI? Because obviously, not only is there a research component, but there's a large teaching component to it. Why did you personally choose to do that?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. How long do you guys have? So my path to ending up as a professor is a little bit non-traditional. So I did undergrad at Davis, and then I did a master's. I actually applied straight to the master's program at University of Rochester. I didn't apply to PhD, so I thought I wanted to just do engineering. But I went and worked at a national lab. So I worked for the lasers program at Lawrence Livermore. And while I was doing that, it was a lot of fun, but I saw that the people with PhDs got to think of the fun problems, not just sort of execute. And I basically wanted to learn how to think like that. And this is what prompted me to go back and do a PhD. I also saw how important computation was, and so that led me to my specific field, sort of add the breadth of signal processing. So while I was in the PhD, I saw let's see. So first off, I taught at Berkeley as a GSI or TA, and I just really liked it. So I've always enjoyed instruction. I benefited a lot from it. I'm a musician, so I also have gotten a lot of lessons in my life, and I just value it. And so actually, a lot of how I chose the academic direction instead of private sector was sort of the feeling that research can be sort of existentially stressful at times. But if at the end of the day I've at least educated people, I think I'll feel satisfied with that, even if research sort of goes poorly at times, which it can, right? It's sort of high risk, high reward stuff. So for me, I really felt like having a component that I could feel good about no matter what, in the form of like mentorship and teaching, was really going to make it sort of deeply satisfying. I also, I've seen some PhD advisors who value productivity over the well-being of their students, and I feel that that's backwards. And so I wanted to sort of join with like an eye towards student well-being as well as productivity. So yeah.
We have about 4 minutes, so if anybody has questions, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had one question about like what are the potential starting directions you see for incoming students at your lab?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am very excited about what computational imaging has to contribute to neuroimaging. I think this is a sort of a terrifyingly daunting task when it comes to like the imaging complexity. If you want to image trillions of neurons embedded in scattering media in a living animal in a non-invasive way, right? This is super, super hard. But there are sort of pieces of this problem where I want to be positioned to make a contribution once the technology on the neuroscience side catches up. So one of those in particular is in trying to make compact high-speed imaging microscopes. So basically right now, if you want to image neurons, while an animal is behaving freely, you need to use pretty limited hardware. You want to sort of attach this to an animal. It needs to be really lightweight and fairly cheap, and that means that the frame rate basically can't keep up with what's actually happening in the brain. Without getting into too many details, I think some of the stuff that I've developed in the past will scale for this kind of problem and will work in a microscope. But I think that studying good spatiotemporal priors, sort of the data science side of how to be good at the specific task, imaging neurons, as well as coming up with the right hardware and hardware design tools is going to be one exciting direction. Also, very interested in generally like sensor fusion for like autonomous systems. So looking at what happens if you mix sort of things like a coded aperture and LiDAR and the conventional cameras together to try to maybe span multiple wavelengths, see better through fog, things like this. But broadly speaking, it's sort of tackling design problems in these domains and then actually prototyping and testing these things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, like, since we just have 1 minute left, just one sort of a random question that, like, since you are interested in prototyping, would you consider kind of scaling up a prototype if it works well to a company or something?
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely. I think it would be interesting. I've thought for a long time about, you know, if you could come up with like a lens for an interchangeable lens camera that would let you do what like light field cameras do. So like adjust focus, change aperture and stuff. But if you could just like plug it into your SLR and then have like a slider that you tune in your favorite, you know, photo editing software like Lightroom, you know, something like that. I think there's a lot of like commercial viability to that. And computational photography is another area that I want to work in that could be pretty directly related to that type of thing. But yeah, definitely open to that if it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, any other questions? I think that's about time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, our
Okay.
time's up. So thanks everyone
Great.
for joining us.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for actually asking questions. I was sort of afraid that no one would actually say anything, so I appreciate that. Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.